Okay, I'd like to call to order the March meeting of the Oregon City Public Library. It's now 5:46, and in attendance, Andrews, Nick Deere, Mighty Blackwell, Larry Osborne, Bill Quarton was available. He looks like he may join us again, and plus the Greg Williams and
So as the library board knows, we've been working on developing a survey for our unincorporated residents. The original goal, the goal was, as we'll be talking about in a little bit, we also do a satisfaction survey for city residents, which Jason's very familiar with. And we want to have wanted to have an instrument that would give us kind of an apples to apples comparison for the first time, these satisfaction levels and awareness levels in our city and in our large unincorporated area. So we talked about it, contracted with Jason and the ETC Institute, since they're the ones doing the city survey. It just made the most sense to have them do both of these. And we had a couple of subcommittee meetings where we went through some draft unincorporated surveys. There may be a couple of things I missed on incorporating that. So anything that didn't make it from those committee meetings is all my responsibility. That's why we have Jason here tonight. So we can kind of go through it, give him any feedback that we might have on things we want to see on the survey, ask him any questions. He's the polling expert. And Jason, I don't know if you wanted to take a couple minutes to introduce yourself at all and talk about talk about this project.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Jason Murato with ETC Institute, and we are a market research firm that specializes in conducting community surveys for local governments. This will actually be the third survey we've conducted for Oregon City in the last few months. Every other year, we do a citywide resident satisfaction survey, but then we also did a Parks and Recreation survey a few months ago as part of the needs assessment project. So yeah, definitely happy to be here to talk about this survey. So this survey, we're surveying unincorporated residents, different from the citywide resident satisfaction, as well as that recreation one we did. Our goal is to receive at least 300 completed surveys, which is the same sample size we had for both the resident satisfaction as well as the park survey. And we administer these surveys by a combination of mail and online. That's our standard methodology for these types of surveys. We'll start by mailing the survey to randomly selected households in that unincorporated area. The mailed survey also will have a link to an online version of the survey, so people have the option of filling it out by mail or online. And then we'll continue administering the survey until we get at least 300 completed surveys. Oftentimes, we'll send a postcard as a follow-up to that mailed survey. And the postcard will have a QR code and link to the online survey. That's really kind of the middle step of the process. The first step is what we're doing right now, designing the actual survey instrument. Then the final step, once we reach that goal of at least 300 completed surveys, we'll process, analyze the data, and then provide a survey findings report. So that's just kind of you might have already known all that, but that's just kind of a quick overview of the process and how we go about conducting a statistically valid survey like this.
Sorry, Jason, you broke up a little bit at the end there, but
okay, can you hear me now?
Yep. I think okay. I think we got most of it. So, with that, any questions? Let's take advantage of Jason's time here. If there are questions or things on the survey that we'd like to see, or do we want to?
Well, my only question was the necessity question number 6, which has to do with, would you be willing to pay more money? Why are we asking that? I mean, I just don't know what we're going to get.
Right. Yeah, I believe that's a question that's on the resident satisfaction survey. We certainly don't need to include it. I don't remember along the lines where that was added to the draft. I think on the citywide resident satisfaction survey, we asked that maybe in regards specifically to parks, or maybe it was just all services.
Yeah, there was one. I think this got added as part of it. So there is a corresponding question on the city survey, and Jason's right. One is specific to parks, but I think there's also one that's just a generic. You know, you've told us here's your satisfaction level with civic services.
Be nice information to have to see if, you know, if, because we're eventually going to be at some point talking about increasing the tax rate.
You know, if you can use it, then fine, but
I think it'd be, I don't know, what do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I think it would be, it would give us an interesting snapshot point in time of what sentiment is now. It might give us some idea of if there were to be a future ask for a higher district rate, what kind of, what the feeling is, at least in the unincorporated areas. I think the only thing is, I don't think on the city survey it specifically said library. I think it was more generic, you know, city services.
Right.
So, but it doesn't cause me angst one way or the other to take it off or leave it.
Yeah, unless given that it didn't say specifically for the library.
Yeah.
So even unless.
Yeah, I suppose if we ever got to the point of doing of where there were some ballot measure out there, we would do additional rounds of polling and more sophisticated asking. So, yeah.
Yeah, this would be, I agree. If you're going to do a ballot initiative, you want to do for sure some more in-depth surveying closer to that time. This would just give you, like you say, just kind of a general idea of how residents feel at this point in time. Yeah, and the one on the resident satisfaction survey was just about a variety of different city services. I was checking to see what the results for that one were, just because I was curious. Trying to find it.
I know Oz has it with him. I think it was about 40% said yes or something like that. You know, it wasn't 50%.
Yeah, yep. 32% said yes, 41% no, which is, 6.5% said not applicable. They don't think the level of service should even be any higher, and then 20% said don't know. So, yeah. And for me, either way, one way or the other. This certainly is not a question we include in all of our surveys. So whatever you guys want to do is perfectly fine with me either way.
Did you have it?
Yeah, I actually took the survey to see whether I had any trouble. And there were a couple of places I had problems with. And one was question 11, which is 3 reasons for using the library, whatever. When I came to that question, I thought, how do I answer this? Because it's first, second, third, or none, but I don't have an 18-year-old living with me. So I think there has to be a not applicable or something in there for people like me to get lost. Okay. And the other one was question 14, where it says, indicate whether you or members of your household use and are aware of each of the following services. And there are places where I was aware but don't use, so that and threw me. And if we're actually equating the two, probably should be an or unpack the portmanteau question and do it some other way. And there was a third thing I came up with that really, I think the reason that it's done this way was to keep it in parallel with the general survey. But the first question, and this is a comment, I'm not suggesting a change at this point, I'm just saying it's a comment in general. The first 2 items on there say selection of physical resources available, selection of digital resources available. And my comment is, I don't think that's what we want to know, because people don't really understand the selection process. What bothers people or concerns people is the quality of the services selected. And using the term selection there, putting myself in non-librarian mode kind of threw me. But I can understand why it should be the same as in the general surveys. I'm not recommending any change.
The word selection is odd.
I don't disagree. I think my recommendation would be, since that was the wording that's currently used on the city survey, that we mirror it this time around. Every time these surveys, because the goal is we're going to be doing this in conjunction with the city survey every 2 years. And so the next time we do it in 2024, we can look at changing the wording to maybe something a little better than selection of.
One of my best professors in college used to say always, it's better to be consistent than correct.
Right.
It's a very, very wise.
Yeah.
All right, so if I can, okay, so let's take them in order, just because I want Jason to have good direct things he can act on. Okay, so for question number one, is everybody okay noting that the oddity of the word selection, maybe that's something we can target for changing next time around, and just in the interest of consistency, we'll keep it this time?
That's fine.
Everybody's okay with that? Okay. I think the next one, on question 6, the do we want to pay? I thought about it. I'm sort of thinking maybe take it off this time around, just because I wouldn't want, especially with a group that has never taken this survey before and has never seen this survey before. I don't want them to think, oh, this is just a secret way to raise taxes. Whereas the city, the people who've taken the city survey have probably seen
It
this.
was a red flag for me. I'm going, oh, this looks a little
Okay.
underhanded or something.
All right.
That was my,
It would be rather embarrassing if 90% said no.
Yeah. Well, which they may, or some, but that'll be the help. Okay.
We have to have direct interest.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And maybe if, as we hope, the conversation advances in the next couple of years about maybe successor district, then maybe that could be something on the city survey, and this will be specifically say library. Okay. Jason will take off number 6.
Okay.
Then number, I guess if you can talk, because you're the survey design expert, so I think Oz's concern was as an example, number 11, do you find that if a question is not applicable to somebody, like they don't have a youth in the household, do they typically circle none? Do they leave it blank? Or is there a way, what would you recommend for that not applicable case?
Yeah, that was definitely a good point that was brought up. A couple of options. I think if we keep it this way, we probably should have a not applicable rather than just none. Because none means that you don't really think, none could mean something different than not applicable. I do think, though, we could also consider just removing this question and have question 10 and not specify whether it's adult or youth. And then we could run a crosstab this question as well as any other question on the survey with question 22, where it asks for the ages of household members. So we can see what the results are for households with young children, households with teenagers, households with adults that don't have kids, seniors. That's actually a really, really common crosstab we run for almost all of our parks and recreation surveys, which are all mainly household-related surveys. Typically, we break the results into those 4 groups: households with children under 10 years old, households with kids ages 10 to 19 in the house, adults ages 20 to 54, but no kids in the house, and then households with adults age 55 and over. So that might be an easier way to find out what the priorities are for this question among different types of households.
And not having seen the direct data from the city survey, I have to ask, this will be included in our current contract. That would be something that you could include under our current contract, right? That level of data analysis.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. There's no extra cost for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
However, I do want to point out that this question correlates with the general results that we saw. I said that one of the areas that were suggested for change very heavily was the young adult area. So there's a direct correlation. I'm not saying we should retained it for that reason, as you pointed out. Okay.
Well, that sort of goes with observation. I don't exactly know how to address it, but when I looked at the resident survey, I noted that 65% of the respondents had no children under the age of 18. And yet there was that, increase, youth services or whatever it was, I thought that was odd. Since the people who responded didn't have any youth. And I'm wondering, as we move out of the unincorporated areas, how will, in our sampling, how will we better survey those people who do have children? Or is it just older people have time to do this kind of thing? And that's why I just feel like, it doesn't feel like, 65% of the households in Oregon City don't have kids under the age of 18. So I was trying to get a grip on how it is when we do the unincorporated area that we'll get a better sampling of people who, or response from people who have kids.
Well, I'm gonna be more apt to fill out something that comes online versus something that's sent in the envelope. So I don't know if that's a generational thing or someone's kids, but I can see someone that's more comfortable, maybe of a certain, I'm not gonna say this right, maybe, right, maybe it's, right?
Yeah.
Yes, maybe you're right, maybe they get the paper survey and that's common, or they're more comfortable filling out the paper survey. You get a link in the mail, or, on your email, and then fill that out because of your time.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that we want to be sure that we do get feedback.
Recording in progress.
Right, because it was not necessarily a bad thing, but the majority of the respondents who don't have kids wanted more activities for youth and whatnot, and that it didn't tell me how the people who had kids felt about it.
And I read this, if you had kids, then you wanted more services, even if it was a smaller number of people, more people that had kids.
I guess I'm just trying to say, I would hope that however we do this, that we get more response from those people who actually have youth, and see, do they really want more activities for that youth?
Right. And Jason, I guess that's a question for you. When you target people to try to get your 300 responses, do you monitor kind of the demographic breakdown of the responses that you're getting? And if you need more to kind of better match the demographics of the area, do you try to get more surveys in to meet those basic targets?
Yeah, we definitely want the demographics of survey respondents to reflect the actual population of the sampling area. For the city, at least according to the U.S. Census, only 6% of residents are under 5 years old. Only 23% are under 18 years old. So I don't think the demographics really were too far off, if they were at all, on the resident satisfaction survey. Now for this, I don't know. I guess we'll have to figure out what the demographics are of the unincorporated area. For cities and counties, you can easily look that up on the U.S. Census. I guess maybe we'll have to look at it by zip code or something like that.
I can give you census tract information.
Okay. Yeah.
Of what's in the unincorporated area.
Right. Yeah, but no, that's absolutely important. Is that the demographics reflect the actual population of the area. We especially look at age, race, ethnicity, and gender are kind of the three that we look at the most closely. And that's where I mentioned, we start by mailing the survey to randomly selected households, but then that mail survey also has an online option. And then when I mentioned we follow up by postcard, those can be targeted to groups who didn't respond as well to the mail survey, whether maybe it's, a certain age group or race or gender. So the postcard tries to accomplish two things. One, to make sure we get at least 300 completed surveys, but also make sure that we have a good representation for those key demographic areas. So yeah, those are definitely important.
So we'll try.
Raising the issue, if it can't understand the limits of surveying, and so I'm hoping that we can somehow address that, but.
Okay. And just to make sure I heard properly, so it sounds like we're okay with Jason's idea of using the demographic data that we'll collect later in the survey to break down this question rather than basically question 10 and 11. Is that correct? We'll get an analog of that, and so we'll still have a good enough apples to apples comparison between the city.
Right. The fewer questions, the better.
Okay. Okay.
It's the more you can get, the better.
Okay. And I think
14.
14. Oh yes. So I want to make sure I understand the question because I don't think I'm having the same cognitive dissonance that you are. So please indicate whether you or members of your household use and are aware. Okay. Let's say.
Yeah.
So use or are aware.
I was aware of most of these.
Okay.
I don't use most of them.
Okay.
So I was really in a quandary of what you were really asking.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So 14, we'll change the wording to instead of use and are aware of, use or are aware of. Does that cause you any concerns, Jason?
No, that's fine. I agree. The wording could be, I think that change sounds fine. Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to think of other ways to word it because it is a little bit, the question is good. It is a little bit awkwardly worded. I do agree with that.
And I do like the information that this question gives us because I saw that one that you had done with another client, and I really, to me, it's really interesting to know. Okay, yes, you're aware, but you don't use it, as opposed to you do use it. That gives us different dimensions to explore. Okay. Were there any other comments or anything? Any other feedback, comments, suggestions?
What's the timing?
So I would say if, so I guess the first, is the board comfortable based on the feedback that we got tonight when we make those changes to going forward with this and getting it out there?
Yes.
Yeah, good, okay, good. So I will leave it to Jason on, let's say we get this finalized, by this week. What might a timeline look like for data collection and results reporting?
Yeah, so once we have these questions finalized, it sounds like we're really close. It takes us about 2 weeks to prepare the survey for printing and mailing. During that time, we pilot test the survey, and that just involves having some of our staff who haven't been involved in their project at all actually taking the survey, like some of you did, to make sure that the questions are easily understood as intended. Make sure the survey is not too long, which it's not. This is a good length survey. So we pilot test the survey, we format it for printing and mailing, which mainly just means adjusting margins and spacing until it's good when it's printed. And then we build the online version of the survey. So once that process is complete, then I'll send you the survey, both the paper version as well as the online survey will be ready for one last review before we actually print and mail. Then if you say everything looks good, then we start printing and mailing the survey. We'll continue administering the survey until we get at least 300 completed surveys. Typically, that takes around 4 weeks. That's just kind of a general estimate. Partially depends on how long it takes the post office to deliver the mail, how quickly residents respond. But that's a typical time.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. So let's say the surveys, and I'll make these changes that we talked about today, Greg, and then just send you the updated survey. Assuming I got everything that we talked about, then we can start that 2-week process I talked about. So assuming that starts at the end of this week, that means I'd send the survey back to you around, that the end of that first week in April, for one final review. Assuming it looks okay, it looks like the surveys will be mailed that next week, April 10th. So I'd estimate survey results, just to be safe, maybe mid-May. Time for people to fill it out, for us to process, analyze the data, and then provide the results.
Great.
Are there any other questions or feedback for Jason? I want to let him go to bed too.
Yeah.
You're our second East Coast person we've had online tonight, so we're keeping people up late.
The first one you said?
Second.
Second, all right.
Early, so.
Yeah. Well, we're central time zone, so at least we're not all the way east, but we're two time zones away from you.
Oh, in that case, we'll keep you up for another hour.
Yeah, right. So yeah, another hour then.
Okay.
All right. Well, Greg, I'll send the survey to you. I mean, probably tomorrow. I made these changes that I talked about, but I'll just make sure I got everything. Send it to you, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, and I will get it back to you before the end of the week, because I'm on vacation next week, and I'll get it. I'll respond before I leave on vacation.
Yeah. Yep. Right. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All righty, great, well done. All right, well, let's go back and do the library director's report.
All right. And as usual, to save on time, if you got our stats, we got our programming stats. I'm still trying to figure out a better way to display those programming stats other than just printing out a spreadsheet that we use. So thank you for your patience while I kind of figure that out. The one thing that we wanted to point out, it was a very positive thing. We're still trying to figure out exactly why, but our January, if you look on the February stats, if you look at last month, we were busy in January. I mean, that number of new card registrations was probably like the third or fourth highest that we've had ever. And we were trying to, it was like almost a summer month in January. And all the staff was like, it felt busy. And even with a holiday in there, we're trying to figure out this is so busy, but it was a busy one. Other than that, I don't think I have any specific things to point out on the data, on the social media data.
And just comparing, knowing that there's computer issues, right? It wasn't reflected though necessarily in the data. So great that there's systems in place so that it doesn't, negatively impact people being able to access that information.
Thank you. We were very pleased that we were able to figure out how to keep our core services going.
There was computer staff here almost every day trying to figure this mess out.
And I will just mention, I know, especially I know Nick, you and I are on the same page. At some point, it's on our pending future issues list, future projects list, to kind of take a look at the data that we're presenting on a monthly basis and make sure that this is useful data to present and collect. If there are different things we want to collect, I know I had spoken to Bill just one-on-one, and there was some different data he might be interested in. So it is on the list to bring back to the group so we can have a discussion about it, but we just haven't gotten there yet. Okay. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I did not include our normal financial data because we have a budget. We have a budget item discussion on the agenda. So,
okay, great.
And any questions on the Friday updates that I've been sending out?
Okay, great.
That's some wonderful stuff. Okay.
Great.
February 1st, we meet with the Oregon Black Pioneers presentation.
They always do.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any public comment requests, Denise?
Yeah.
No. Okay. That said, let's go to the review of the city's community survey.
Okay. So I had sent everybody the city's selected items from the city survey. I also sent you the link to the whole thing. It is very interesting. I think the big takeaways, so we all know this is just city residents, so it's only 60% of our service area. But even with that, it was gratifying for us to be back on top of all city services. So during COVID,
just beat out the city sewer services.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
that's good.
That is very frustrating, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So my takeaway is the things I liked that I was really happy with. If you look at that overall quality of city's public library services, even compared to pre-COVID when we were similarly first, our number of dissatisfied went way down, which I really like. It was 5% 6 years ago, and it's 1% now. So that made me happy. I was particularly a couple of things that I really liked. The comparison between regional and nationwide benchmarks, we were 15% higher than our regional benchmark. So I was really thrilled with that. I thought it was a really nice thing to see that we exceeded that so nicely, so highly. The other thing that struck me was, well, two other things that struck me, and then please feel free to ask questions or discuss. In the library services one, I was very happy to see that our selection of physical resources available went up so much. Denise and I talked about this. I think that is at least in part a direct result of the efforts that we have been putting forth to look at the purchase alert list to make sure that our hold versus borrow ratio is staying more equal. We have made some changes to pre-order some more materials to make sure that we're not missing things, hot things that come in. We've kind of changed the way we use lucky day items. So I would like to think that some of those efforts are reflected in that score. So that made me happy. The one that did not, make me happy was the satisfaction rate with events for children. And that events for children. So it did go down.
I've got feedback on that.
And we'd love to hear the feedback. I will say, my first responses, and this kind of gets into the budget thing. Some of it is resources. I think that we see in every, when you look at the things that had the highest rates of, these are what people want to see more of. I think I pointed out, of the top 7, 5 of them are events for _. And when we look at it, staff, it's staff resources to be able to make those things happen, which that is a challenge that we have right at the moment. So
in general on this, while there are exceptions, it looks like 2018 was relatively high, 2019 went down, and then 2020 came back up. No, so what I'm saying is the middle one dropped.
Yes, and that survey was sent out. The building was still closed for COVID. So we anticipated that it was going to go down that year. And when we discussed this 2 years ago, that was a drop that everybody across the nation had seen. So I wish, even if it had been like a month different, we would have been more open than we were. But this was right at the height of people feeling, I just want to get back in the library. Yeah, stop making me stop doing no hold pickup and let me give money back in the building. So,
or just as a general thing, this concept of the important satisfaction rating, I think is a great tool. I wish I would have had the availability of that. I wish I would have thought of it when I was doing this stuff.
Yeah. No, I think it's very useful as well. That's what except when they look at citywide, then I totally disagree with it because we're last. But we're the highest satisfaction with the, again.
Well, I think it's being taken for granted. I mean, I think it's that, I think that's what's going on. And I think,
people are happy. So it's, like the library's great, they don't really need more money, right? So I think that kind of is kind of just like,
Yeah, that's the hard one. So, that's kind of the takeaway. And I'd love to, yes. We're going to have more discussions about how we, address that events for children. One, a big part of it is staff, to be honest. I mean, at this group,
what is more, right? Like there used to be more free play opportunities. There used to be more of those, just show up, drop it for the store.
well, there were toys, so there was all that stuff.
And I understand the changes, and that was just not something that, as a whole, the people that I've talked to me about it appreciated, or it's not as beneficial to them and their children, or as like something.
Right. And we hear that feedback as well. So we'll have some more conversation about it. The one thing that I'm sure part of this is, and with me, it always get that staff resources. We did make some changes the way we allocate staff. So things like the fact that we're putting more effort into our team programming and our team services. I didn't add any staff to do that. I had to take Sabrina. I took time from Sabrina that she normally would be spending down in these services and, doing some of those things, and said, no. The last time we got surveyed, services for teams were really high, very important. It's also an area we know we need to do better. And so I think some of that is, it's.
Well, there's also the change of having the Legos and all that stuff. There were always lots of people surrounding that and whatnot. And that just disappeared. And I think people recognize that, because I used to take my grandkids there all the time, and just not.
Very few places that are considered, well, really nothing other than like the open play at the park district that was where, you just have kids can just go and play inside.
Right.
Yep. And that's, I mean, we try to
all the problems.
No. Thank you for saying that. We always say, yes, these are communities. It can't fall just on the library. It's a citywide issue. But we do try to put playtime into our story times, right? So the story time always ends with playtime with toys. With more staff, we could do more story time. We could probably have a dedicated playtime, opportunity in the community room. It's just right now, I would not be able to staff our desks, in these services, and we can't leave those desks on staff.
Yeah, that was interesting. The on-call staff just mentioned what and how she be utilized. But in reality, that looks like on a day basis.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions or anything to discuss on the city circuit?
I just want to congratulate the staff and you and, just for really great results. There's sure little blips here and there, and as one of us said, it's always possible to improve, but you guys did a great job. And with, severe funding and staffing drains and getting over COVID as an episode in everyone's lives and society, I just think it's really great that the library is just so well perceived by the community, and I just want to congratulate all of you for that.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, thank you very much, and like I always say, it's Denise and I get to sit here and hear that. We'll pass it on to staff, but it's our staff. They're the ones that they're the ones that work with people every day and smile when people come in. We have a great staff.
All right, let's shift to the Monday budget for the next biennium.
Okay.
As you can see, Greg has done an incredible job of putting together that enormous report and comparison and looking at sort of the glide path for the last 10 years and what the next 10 years could bring. Just in terms of context, we're expecting some feedback from the city any moment in terms of whether they bought some of the recommendations that Greg has made to the city manager. I'm meeting with the mayor next Tuesday morning, just unofficially, just over coffee, to sort of talk about really 4 issues. One is just how this is a unique department of the city that's got a city service area and responsibility for another 25,000 people outside of the city, and they are actually funding us more than the city is. So that's one thing. And then just to share with her that this 10-year process that we looked at, and give her a copy of this, looking at the staffing issues, which I have some ethical issues with, where we're depending upon people that are not benefited, and it's creating a management nightmare just to manage that staffing. And then finally, just the leadership process, the pressure it puts on these 2 people to do this scares me, because without any administrative support, they're dealing with these crazy issues because they have so many on-call people that they've got to schedule all the time. And I just wanted her to be sensitive to the fact that we're advisory to them and they need to listen. And then I will have the opportunity to go before the whole commission on the April 4th, and I'll send you, I haven't quite finished my testimony yet, but I'll get that out in the next few days so everybody will be able to see sort of that, and it's going to be a little tougher. That basically put up or shut up kind of, in a positive kind of way, but that look at what has happened over the last 10 years. There's been, great satisfaction by the city, but the city support has degraded substantially.
And when you give that testimony, is that on behalf of yourself or as a board?
That's as a board,
Okay.
Representing the board.
Yeah.
And we're advisory to the commission.
Sure.
Yeah. So if anybody, I'll get it to you beforehand. So anything, just get back to me if there's anything that strikes you as being problematic. So.
Okay. The first, I want to thank everybody for being engaged in the budget process. You had a couple of long subcommittee meetings. I'm sorry that this year with our computer issues, it's compressing the budget timeline tremendously. At this point, we anticipated we would have more, firm information to be able to share with you. I doubt I think before our next meeting, we will know what our budget proposal is going to be to the city, and I'm not going to have a chance to discuss it with this body beforehand. So that's why I provided kind of showing you what we had requested in the materials and services area. I tried to present in that memo some of the things that keep us up at night, challenges we're facing. These are things that we discussed with our subcommittee about what we felt was needed to put the library on some sustainable footing going forward, and to be able to provide those services that everybody is paying for, especially the folks in the unincorporated area. We just want to make sure that they're getting the service that they deserve. The other thing I did want to share, I think there didn't seem to be a lot of concern in our city meeting with it. One of the things that we're doing is we're proposing to zero out the fine revenue in our operating budget, so that we can tell the community Link might not be ready to go fine free just yet. But from an equity standpoint, we are not relying on that revenue to provide ongoing operations. Any money that we do collect for fines, which people are able to give, we will be budgeting for that in our capital repair replace account. And it's about the same that we've been transferring there every year. So that was important to me. And in the committee discussions that we had, the committee very much supported that.
I think one of the most important things here is the glide path to start using some of the library fund money to get to a place in 10 years when, one, the bond will be paid off. And secondly, there'll still be more than $2 million in that fund, so that it's still a conservative endpoint. And that they understand that this is not one-time money. This was money that wasn't budgeted, that was collected, that was operating money that just kept getting rolled over, even though it was needed at the time. And so there.
So I guess with that, I'll just open it up for questions. If you have any questions about line items that we presented, please feel free to ask. It puts up a lot of numbers, and some people like to dig into it. Did you have anything you wanted to say about the budget? Or
no, not really. I think, I've done an amazing amount of work on this that I truly appreciate. I didn't have this kind of support in the past with our prior directors, so I'm feeling really good and confident. And hopefully we get some of what we've asked for and what we need, because the scheduling is a nightmare. It's the majority of my job. And
the good news is, even if you don't get part of what you asked for, what you've done with this is provide data that then can be updated I mean, the library status in relationship to staffing and other similar sized libraries is not going to change overnight. What you have developed is a set of compelling statistics that you can go back to again and again, and you're laying the groundwork for asks in the future. And I think that's as important as some of the absolute, amounts per line item. I think the infrastructure building around the budget and the future budget requests is really critical. And I really appreciate the work that's been done on that.
Well, the other more political question also is, at some point we may want to get some children and old folks and whatnot to come to the city commission. And I don't know when that will be, but it was actually suggested by the mayor in a conversation she had with Greg, that it may have some value.
To give testimony or just to be physically present?
To be present when, yeah.
Yes, so
Yeah.
The budget committee is the budget committee hearings are a public process. There is an opportunity for public comment. I will say like it says in the code, the board is also involved in the presentation of the budget. At this point, I don't know. I don't think that's something the city has ever done before. So I value everybody's input and I want to involve you. So please let me know if you have ideas about that. I don't anticipate that I'm going to have really an opportunity to present anything. Typically, the way it works at Oregon City is the city manager presents the budget request. If budget committee members have specific questions, they may defer it to the department director or the manager to answer. But I don't know if there's going to be a formal opportunity for the board. So it might be that public comment period. So any input that you as a board would like to have in the budget process, I'm completely supportive of. Just let me know how we make that work. And I will get you the budget schedule. So you can please mark on your calendars when those hearings are going to be. I think we have the dates. I think Matt sent them out.
That's why I just didn't know if there was a way for us to submit even written, an individual, if that would be
I will find
beneficial.
I would say anytime that the designated advisory body that the city commission has empowered, like David says, to be advisors, anytime you have feedback that you would like the commissioners hear, as long as it's, if you're speaking on behalf of the board, I would just say make sure that you've discussed it in a board meeting so that you can say it. But if you want to provide individual feedback, I'm a firm believer in citizens communicating with their elected officials.
Thank you for that clear direction.
Nick, you've been so quiet. There's numbers and you've been so quiet.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of all this money every now and we're going in saying that we don't have enough money. But we do have enough money. So it's just
in the wrong pot.
Yeah. Well,
I think we should be able to deal with that.
Yes.
That's the thing. I think we are dealing with it.
Yes.
But when I'm sitting, when I get a call back, we have to try to justify what we're doing. And we have these buckets of money, and we have the fact that we're, bought that thing for our land now, district money. It's difficult. And we're the only,
Like us and Sandy.
Yes, but we're even with Sandy's doing, we're number one.
Yeah, and I think what we can say again, I don't know I don't have any answers from I don't know what the end budget proposal will be, but at least from what we've talked about and put forth, what we would say is yes, we've got this fund balance that was intended for operations. We are now using that fund balance for operations. I mean, it's basically it's staff and a little bit of materials because I hate being last, last in the state. So we're using the money that was intended. We are also we know that money is not, that pot of money is not going to be sufficient beyond a certain time frame. And so we're using that to get us to the point where we can have sustainable funding, which using our district dollars, we are hopefully, asking for some general fund support while the bond exists so that we can demonstrate that, city general fund is paying a good chunk of our debt service payment. And even when that goes away, we still have some city support going forward in hopefully in perpetuity.
Well, I still think that we have going through this budgeting process right now. The focus is on the next 2 years, even though I know you have a plan for that in the future. I don't. Right now, I think the commission and the city is going to be focused on what we're doing over the next 2 years. Yeah. And I don't know if we've ever presented at a work session for the city commission as an example.
No, we haven't.
Could we do that, something like that we could actually get that really more I'm not sure what the word is, to get that more in tune with sort of where we're going for the long term in the future.
Yes.
And then, because I think whatever plan we come out with today, a plan is a plan, for the 10 years or whatever. I think if we explore it, as we continue to explore it, we're going to probably come up with other options that we haven't maybe even cut off. So that's that 10-year plan. I think it's great to have it as a framework, but it's going to change. Right. So it's just and so if we could get them on some, the city commission or, if we could just get buy-in to that longer term plan. Because I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that happening through budget process.
No, I think that's a great point, and it has been on my list of goals to have that work session. It was actually it was one of the ones that I was not able to do on my last my performance evaluation from the city, so I marked myself down for that one. We do want to get in front of the city commission because I think they would very much benefit from just an update on, hey, a couple of years ago, we heard about this task force and you heard about all these issues that were facing the library district, and then nothing, as COVID happened. But we want to re-engage you on, okay, here's kind of the macro things at the district level that are happening and the conversations that are happening, and then filtering down, this impacts every library. Here's how it impacts Oregon City, and that's where we can talk about it. These are some of the funding challenges you heard on the budget process. This is how we are looking at going forward to deal with these over the next, 10 years. It's our plan. But it's also, as I put in here, I think it would be to our benefit to starting the conversation about, at some point, expenses are going like this and revenues are not rising nearly as fast. And at some point, the conversation about, do we go out for a successor district has to occur. And so I think that would be a good introduction and say, okay, we think we have a plan that's going to get us over the midterm, but beyond that, absent some structural change in the way the district operates and is funded, there's going to be a lot of pain out there for libraries. So that's kind of what I would say.
One way to look at it is I think we need to focus on how we got this point.
Yeah.
But we obviously that's what we're doing is kind of the judgment for 10 years going forward. Help us remove that.
Okay. I will talk to the mayor also about getting a work session with the commission.
And she did when we gave the CIC citizen involvement, they gave a quick update. I went and spoke to them about the community room policy and the changes that we made that. And as part of that presentation, I did take a little opportunity at the beginning of it to just kind of talk about some constraints and what our service areas. I think there was it was eye-opening for some folks. And so the mayor did say, hey, we'd love to have you come back and talk about the community room and library stuff. So I think we have an entree there. So we'll try to take advantage of it this year. And of course, I will invite everybody to be there and speak.
Okay, any other questions, comments? No? Great, okay, communications, foundation.
We didn't meet last month, and we're meeting tomorrow, so I don't really have much to say to you. So we're just pursuing foundation business. We're gonna be talking about some kind of fundraising at some point. We just don't know what that's gonna look like and what our priorities are gonna be. So we have 2 members that have come in, and we sort of need to give them time to get their feet under them and get oriented, I guess you might say, to the business of the foundation. And I suspect that as the next few months of spring and early summer go by, then we'll have to bring something back to you more concrete.
And if I may piggyback on that, one of the things I am going to be talking to the foundation about budget, giving them an update with the budget. In the budget, in some of our capital requests, there were 2 items in there to use some of our funds that we have available to support fundraising efforts for an outreach vehicle, and potentially book lockers in there. So again, my biggest concern with those now is staff. It doesn't do any good to have an outreach vehicle if we don't have people who actually go and do outreach. But that is one of the things in the budget proposal, is at least some way of supporting the foundation in their fundraising for this. I think it would be a great thing. It would attract some grants, and probably attract some donations, and we can say, hey, if we raise this much, the city will, a lot of it will match.
Okay, good. Anything from LDOT?
Thanks for no really big update. Great, you haven't presented you going on behind the scenes.
I have not heard of anything. I know we're supposed to have a meeting at some point coming up. Commissioner status
Scheduled for April.
Yeah.
But most likely we'll manage that as like some of the day.
Yeah. No, I have not heard anything. I have no other updates.
Friends?
The big thing was the installation of the Friends sales area, and as Greg pointed out during the break, it's now been completed with the beautiful wood and so on. So they've started operations and they're taking credit cards. Yeah?
We work with our finance department, so kudos to our finance department. We can now take credit cards in our existing credit card system, which we could never do before. And then we basically cut the Friends check every month. We keep track of the sales that they make, and we cut them a check. So yes.
Good. And we've seen the great effort that
Right, yes, the teen group was the teen advisory committee. Great, so got about a dozen kids that come, together that once a month, and then throughout the month have their own activities. They get to make decisions on, what string to put in the boxes and things like that. But you can see it's empowering to them, when they're all together there, they have discussions. They Find Your Voice is the theme for the summer program. Talk about that. The exciting part was May the 4th, right? They got asked to be volunteers, and every single kid raised their hand. I mean, you don't go to a room, everybody in the room volunteers to come. Well, they get a t-shirt on.
I was just gonna say, we should get a t-shirt.
And they got to pick the black with the yellow. And so, but it was just the energy is very uplifting, and it's great to see that. And people in the other little story was, they were trying to think of a evening. The libraries will close in 15 minutes. Gathering your things and heading toward a self-checkout machine to check out any items that you would like to take home. Thank you. For April, they wanted to pick a theme that they would do their book displays and their online. And they saw that it was Middle Eastern, Northern African Heritage Month. And there's one of the students is a exchange student from Egypt. And she was so excited that she could have the opportunity to share a little bit about her culture. And then she heard the Eid festival down at Soul Flags, which is the end of Ramadan. And we celebrate that, and that's something she celebrates. So it was nice to see that community connection that she could take part in as well. Yep, I like that. this assignment, so I think this is
Good, yay. And speaking of giving them choice, one of the other things, if you notice in our budget, we did put a little money into kind of some upgrades, potential upgrades to the teen area to make it a more welcoming environment for teen. And our plan has always been, should that get approved, if we have money in the budget, we would want, hey, teens, help us. Tell us what you want to see, in that space. What's going to make this okay? Good. We want to.
Yes. You have to keep it realistic.
Anything else for the good of the order?
One thing real quick, I have a new music advisory commission, and I think it'd be great if they were aware of what's going on in the library from a music perspective.
Oh, they're sitting.
I think there's some.
There is at least one student that's on both.
Cool.
That would be great. So
Yeah, there is one.
Yeah.
One of the students that she mentioned that.
Yeah, we can figure out some way, because I think that's a great thing to have them report out to the city.
It's the activity.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm like you. I'm so thrilled. There's such a great group, and just great energy.
All right, let's terminate the meeting at 6:47. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and extra time today.